The rain poured like silver tears over the city that night, and somewhere, high above the lights of Manhattan, a blind man sat in silence. His name was Ethan Ward. Once he saw everything: the faces of powerful men, the glitter of success, the woman he believed he'd spend forever with. But now, all he saw was darkness. Brief pause. 3 years had passed since the car crash that stole his sight. 3 years since he'd watched the world fade to black. And yet, even blindness hadn't taken away the one thing that still haunted him: the memory of his fiancée. Vanessa, to everyone else, she was an angel, devoted, patient, loving. But in truth, she was the shadow behind his darkness. Music shifts, soft suspense strings. When Amira arrived, everything began to change. She was young, quiet. Her voice trembled when she spoke. Yet every word she said carried warmth. She read to him, described sunsets to him in colors he could feel. And for the first time in years, Ethan smiled again. But one day, while organizing his study, Amira found something she wasn't meant to see: a folder of medical reports, an experimental surgery that could restore Ethan's sight. It was possible. It was real. And it was crossed out. In Vanessa's handwriting, pause, thunder rolls softly. At first, Amira wanted to ignore it, but then she overheard Vanessa on the phone, her voice cold, sharp. If he regains his sight, everything changes, everything. Amira's heart pounded. What did that mean? Why would the woman who claimed to love him want him blind forever? Music swells and emotional tension builds. That night, Amira approached Ethan, her voice barely a whisper. "Mr. Ward, I think your fiancé's been lying to you." The words hung in the air like lightning before a storm. Ethan froze. "What do you mean, lying?" She told him everything: the folder, the phone call, the meeting with a stranger, every detail she could remember. And when she finished, her eyes filled with tears. "I don't know what her plan is, sir," she said, "but she doesn't want you to get better. She wants you blind." Soft silence and the sound of rain tapping glass. Ethan didn't speak, but something inside him shifted. It wasn't anger, it was awakening. Piano slows. Heartbeat rhythm builds faintly. That evening, Vanessa came home with her usual perfume and a sweet smile. "Darling," she said, "I brought dinner from your favorite restaurant." Ethan sat still, his tone quiet, almost calm. "Tell me something, Vanessa," he said. "Did you ever talk to a doctor in Zurich?" She froze. The sound of glass being set down was sharp. "What? Of course not. Why would you?" "You're lying," he interrupted softly. "I know about the report you hid." Her voice hardened. "Ethan, it was dangerous. You could have died. I was protecting you. Or protecting your secret," he said quietly. Beat of silence. The mask slipped, and for the first time he heard her real voice. Cold, ruthless, calculating. Music shifts to determination. Slow build. The next day, Ethan called his lawyer. No shouting. No confrontation. Just action. Within a week, investigators uncovered everything. The shell companies, the stolen charity funds, the meetings Vanessa thought no one knew about. She had used his blindness as a shield, his love as a weapon. And now, her empire of deceit began to crumble. But Ethan didn't seek revenge. He sought freedom. And for that, he turned once again to Amira. "Come with me," he said. "There's a doctor in Zurich I need to..." Plane engines hum softly. Music shifts to, "Ope." Amira's hands trembled as they boarded the jet. "The surgery has only a 50% chance of success," she whispered. Ethan smiled faintly. "That's 50% more than I had yesterday." She squeezed his hand. "You're brave." "No," he said quietly. "I'm just tired of living in the dark." Sound fades. Surgical heart monitor beeps faintly. 9 long hours passed when Ethan finally opened his eyes. The world was blurry, soft light, faint colors, shapes, and then a figure. Standing at his bedside, hands clasped, eyes wet with tears. Amira. The first thing he truly saw in years was her smile. He whispered. "You're real." She laughed through her tears. "I told you," she said softly. "I can heal your eyes." Music swells, strings and piano together. Weeks later, Vanessa was gone. Her lies exposed, her accounts frozen, her silence deafening. Ethan didn't chase her. He didn't need to. Instead, he built something new, a foundation dedicated to restoring vision for those who couldn't afford it, and standing beside him every step of the way was Amira. Scene shift, sound of children laughing, birds chirping. One afternoon, while visiting a school for blind children, a small boy tugged at Ethan's sleeve and asked, "Sir, what was the first thing you saw when you got your eyes back?" Ethan smiled. "Kindness," he said softly. "Because kindness is something you don't need eyes to see." Music softens into gentle warmth. Later that evening, as the sun set over the Manhattan skyline, Ethan stood by the window of his penthouse, the same place he once sat, blind and broken. Now, he saw a city bathed in gold. Amira joined him quietly. "You really did it," she whispered. "You can see again." Ethan turned to her, the faintest smile touching his lips. "Thanks to you," she shook her head. "No, thanks to truth. I just reminded you how to look for it." They stood side by side in silence. The city shimmered below, a million lights dancing like hope reborn. Final piano chord. Slow and emotional. Narrator, soft, emotional, close. Sometimes, the greatest healing doesn't come from medicine. It comes from honesty, from courage, and from compassion. Because when the world goes dark, it only takes one brave soul to whisper, "I can heal your eyes." Moral message: real vision isn't about sight. It's about seeing people for who they truly are. Kindness can restore what betrayal destroys. And truth will always bring the light back. Months passed since that day in the clinic when Ethan's world was restored. Not just through the light returning to his eyes, but through the awakening of his soul. The world outside gleamed brighter than ever, but the truest radiance he saw was within the faces of people he and Amira helped. Their foundation. The vision within began humbly. One clinic in New York that provided free eye treatments to the poor. But compassion, once unleashed, has a way of multiplying. Within a year, donations poured in, and new centers opened in Detroit, Houston, and Chicago. Ethan, once the blind billionaire who hid behind his pain, was now the man who used his vision to give others theirs. Amira became the beating heart of the movement. Her story, of a young woman from humble beginnings who once whispered, "I can heal your eyes," to a broken man, inspired thousands. Media outlets sought interviews. Universities invited her to speak. But Amira never spoke of fame. When asked what drove her, she always said softly, "Because someone once looked at me and saw not my skin, not my past, but my purpose." Ethan would often stand in the back of those rooms, smiling faintly. He knew that her strength had healed far more than his eyes. It had healed his faith in humanity. One morning, as sunlight filtered through his glass office overlooking Central Park, Ethan watched Amira across the room, laughing with a group of young volunteers. Her laughter, gentle, free, made him pause. He remembered the nights when she stayed awake beside him, teaching him to navigate the world again after his sight returned. How she never treated him like a burden or a project, only as a person worth saving. That was when he realized, love doesn't always come wrapped in promises. Sometimes it comes disguised as kindness that refuses to give up on you. The Foundation's next mission was to expand beyond the U.S., to places where medical access was a dream. Amira proposed Kenya first. "We start where light is most needed," she told him. So they went to the dry winds of Nairobi, the villages where children had never seen the faces of their parents clearly, where grandmothers reached out to touch the doctors as if they were miracles made flesh. Ethan, humbled, walked among them not as a millionaire, but as a man reborn. He listened to their stories, touched their hands, and felt something pure stir inside him, a gratitude that transcended words. Amira worked tirelessly, sometimes falling asleep over her notes, her head resting on the table as dawn painted the horizon pink. Ethan would quietly drape a blanket over her and whisper, "You've given the world so much light. Amira, don't forget to rest in it too." She'd smile sleepily, whispering back, "Light only matters when it's shared." Their bond deepened. But it wasn't romance in the way people imagined. No grand gestures, no sudden confessions. It was something quieter, sacred. A connection built through shared purpose and the silent understanding of two souls who had both known pain. Still, rumors began to spread about the chemistry between them, about the way Ethan's eyes always softened when she entered a room. Journalists speculated. Former associates of Vanessa, the fiancée whose betrayal had nearly destroyed him, hinted that Amira was just another woman seeking advantage. Ethan ignored them, but one evening when he returned from a trip, he found Amira in the garden behind the clinic, her eyes red from tears. "They're saying I'm only here because of what you can give me," she said quietly, "that I'm using you the way she did." He stepped closer, voice steady but filled with emotion. "Amira, I don't care what they say. You didn't just heal my eyes, you helped me see who I am. They can't take that from us." She met his gaze, the gaze she had once given back to him, and whispered, "Then promise me something. Promise me you'll keep doing this even if one day I'm not here to guide you." Ethan frowned, sensing something in her tone. "What do you mean?" She hesitated, then finally admitted that she'd been struggling with exhaustion and a heart condition that she had kept hidden, not wanting to burden the mission or him. The words hit him like a blow. For a moment all the light around him dimmed again. "You saved my life, Amira," he said hoarsely. "Now let me save yours." Months of treatment followed. Ethan brought the best doctors, the best care. Amira continued working despite her condition, never letting it define her. The clinics flourished, and their bond only grew stronger. One evening in Nairobi, during the Foundation's first global conference, Ethan gave a speech that silenced the room. "I once lived in darkness, not just the kind that blinds your eyes, but the kind that blinds your heart. I thought betrayal had taken everything from me. But then someone came along who reminded me that healing isn't about curing wounds. It's about believing that love, in its purest form, still exists." He turned to where Amira sat, her hand over her heart, tears streaming down her face. "Amira," he said, "you gave me sight, but more than that, you gave me vision. And that will live far beyond either of us." The audience rose in a standing ovation. But for Ethan, the only thing he saw was the woman who had taught him how to see. Years later, after Amira's passing, Ethan continued her dream. He renamed the foundation the Amira Light Initiative, a network of hospitals and schools providing not just medical care, but education and hope. On the 10th anniversary of her death, he stood before a group of children in a small African village. They had just received sight-restoring surgery. One little girl tugged at his sleeve and asked, "Sir, how did you learn to make people see again?" Ethan knelt, smiled gently, and said, "Because once someone healed my eyes, and when I finally saw the world, I saw her light everywhere." The girl grinned, eyes shining like stars, and ran off to join her friends. Ethan stood there watching her, the wind carrying the distant laughter of children, and somewhere deep in his heart, the echo of a voice that would never fade. Light only matters when it's shared. Epilogue that night. Ethan wrote in his journal, the same one he'd started the day Amira healed his eyes. "I used to think seeing meant having eyes. Now I know seeing means having love. Amira didn't just show me the world. She showed me the part of myself that can still love it back." As he closed the book, he looked up at the sky, vast, dark, sprinkled with star glimmers, and smiled. The world was still full of darkness. But now, he knew how to bring the light. The morning sun rose gently over the fields of Uganda, where rows of tents stood like pearls against the green hills. The air was alive with chatter, doctors, nurses, and volunteers moving between makeshift clinics. The Amira Light Initiative had grown into one of the largest humanitarian movements in the world, and at the center of it all was Ethan Hale, older now, quieter, but carrying the same warmth in his voice that Amira once carried in her smile. His hair was flecked with silver, but his eyes, the eyes she had helped him reclaim, still held the same soft brilliance. He walked through the camp slowly, greeting every patient by name. Children ran to him laughing, tugging at his sleeves. A boy with new bandages over his eyes held Ethan's hand and whispered, "I can see the sky, sir." "It's blue!" Ethan laughed, tears welling in his eyes. "Yes, it is. And you'll never forget that color again." He turned, gazing out at the horizon. Sometimes he imagined Amira standing beside him, her soft laughter carried on the wind, her words echoing in every act of kindness around him. But this day was different. A journalist had arrived, a young woman named Nia Brooks, there to document the 10th anniversary of the foundation. She was curious, ambitious, and carried a notebook everywhere. As she interviewed the volunteers, she noticed Ethan speaking to an elderly woman whose vision had just been restored. The tenderness in his voice made her pause. Later she approached him. "Mr. Hale, people call you the man who saw twice. Why do you still come here personally? You could lead from your offices in New York." Ethan smiled faintly. "Because healing isn't about medicine, Miss Brooks. It's about presence. You can't heal what you won't touch." She scribbled that down, but her eyes softened. There was something about him, a serenity that came from someone who had walked through fire and come out carrying light instead of ash. That evening, Nia joined Ethan by the campfire. The stars stretched endlessly above them, the night humming with distant laughter. She hesitated, then asked, "Do you ever think about her, the woman who inspired all this?" Ethan looked up at the stars, smiling wistfully. "Every day. But I don't miss her. Not the way people think. I see her everywhere. In every life we change. Every child who opens their eyes for the first time. That's how love survives. Not in memory, but in motion." He turned to her. "Would you like to hear the real story?" And for the first time in years, Ethan told it all. From the betrayal that blinded him, to the day Amira whispered, "I can heal your eyes." He spoke of her strength, her laughter, her stubborn compassion. By the time he finished, Nia's eyes glistened with tears. "That's not a love story," she whispered. "That's a resurrection," Ethan chuckled softly. "Maybe, or maybe it's just what happens when two souls meet. One broken, one burning, and both refuse to give up." The next morning, Nia's article was published online with the title, "The Man Who Saw Twice: How a Blind Billionaire and a Girl's Promise Changed the World." It went viral within hours. People everywhere, from Seoul to São Paulo, were moved to tears. Donations flooded in, and volunteers signed up in thousands. But among the hundreds of messages that reached Ethan's inbox, one stood out, a short letter from a teenage girl in Chicago. "Dear Mr. Hale, I was born blind in one eye. I used to hate my life, hate the mirror, hate God. But then I read about you and Miss Amira. Now I want to be a doctor, just like her. Maybe one day I'll heal someone's eyes too. Thank you for showing me that I can still be light." Faith M. Ethan read the letter 3 times. Then he folded it gently, placed it in the journal he once shared with Amira, and whispered, "You see, Amira, the light is still spreading." Chapter 4, The Light Returns. A few months later, the Foundation's board gathered in New York. They were launching a new scholarship, the Amira Fellowship, for medical students from underprivileged backgrounds. On the day of the announcement, a young woman stepped nervously onto the stage. It was Faith Miller, the same girl who had written that letter. She was only 19, but her presence commanded the room. She spoke about her struggles, her blindness, and how the Amira story had given her purpose. Her final words silenced the audience. "I may never see perfectly, but because of her, I've learned that perfect sight means seeing people as they are, not what they look like." Ethan rose from his seat, tears in his eyes. He walked to the stage and handed her the first Amira Fellowship Award himself. "You remind me so much of her," he said softly. "Keep healing the world, Faith. That's how she'll live forever." Faith nodded, smiling through tears. "I will, sir." That night, as Ethan sat alone in his study, he opened the balcony doors. The city below glittered, 1,000 points of light reflecting off the glass towers. He thought of how far he'd come, from a man blinded by betrayal to one illuminated by love. He whispered into the quiet, "You were right, Amira. Light only matters when it's shared." And at that moment, for the briefest second, he swore he felt her beside him. Not as a ghost, but as warmth, as presence, as purpose. He didn't need to see her to know she was there, because some people, once they've touched your soul, never really leave. Epilogue, the legacy of vision 20 years later. The Amira Light Initiative had clinics in over 40 countries. Millions of people could see because 2 hearts once dared to believe in healing. Ethan's health began to fade with age, but his spirit never dimmed. In his final recorded message, played at the Foundation's global anniversary, he said, "When I lost my sight, I thought my life was over. But then I met someone who reminded me that love doesn't always need eyes. It only needs faith." If you're listening to this, remember, you don't have to be rich to change the world. You just have to care enough to try. As his words echoed across screens in cities and villages around the globe, people wept, smiled, and held each other a little tighter. And somewhere, in the hearts of those who believed, the light continued. Because the girl who once whispered, "I can heal your eyes," had healed the world instead.